The fluorescent lights of the office building hummed, a sterile soundtrack to the anxiety churning in my gut. My resume was a carefully constructed lie, a patchwork of skills I barely possessed and experience I'd embellished to the point of near fiction. I needed this job, badly. Rent was due, my car was on its last legs, and ramen was starting to lose its appeal. The receptionist, a woman with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, had directed me to a plush waiting area. I tried to look nonchalant, but my leg was bouncing a nervous rhythm against the floor. This was it, the final interview at Sterling Industries, a tech company that seemed to exist in a realm of its own. I'd somehow managed to make it this far, through phone screenings and personality tests that made me question my very existence. The double doors to the inner office suite swung open, and a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit emerged. He was like something out of a magazine, dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes that seemed to hold the weight of the world, or at least the entire stock market. This was Alexander Sterling, the CEO, the man whose signature would decide my fate. He was around 40, with an air of established power and refined taste. He extended a hand, his grip firm and surprisingly warm. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Alexander Sterling. Thank you for coming in." His voice was a low rumble, the kind that made you sit up straighter. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Sterling," I managed, trying to sound confident despite the fact that my palms were sweating. He led me into his office, which was less an office and more a modern art gallery masquerading as one. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city, and a sleek desk seemed to float in the center of the room. He gestured for me to sit in one of the leather chairs that looked far too expensive for my budget. So, he began, leaning back in his own chair, his gaze intense. "Tell me about yourself, Mr. Hayes." I launched into my rehearsed monologue, highlighting my, mostly fictional, achievements and playing up the few actual skills I possessed. I talked about my passion for technology and my dedication to problem solving, all while fighting the urge to fidget. I was 25, freshly graduated, and desperate for a break. He listened, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on me. It was a little unnerving, like being under a microscope. I finished, suddenly aware of how dry my mouth felt. "Interesting," he said, his voice slow, "considering your qualifications are adequate." My heart sank. Adequate? That was corporate speak for not good enough. I was already mentally preparing to eat ramen for the rest of the month. Then he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, and his gaze locked onto mine. "But, Mr. Hayes," he continued, a subtle shift in his tone, "I find myself more interested in something else." My brain stalled. What other something could he possibly be referring to? He paused, his lips curving into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm drawn to your energy. Your enthusiasm. You have a certain presence, Mr. Hayes." I blinked, completely thrown. My presence? Was this some kind of bizarre compliment disguised as a job rejection? He chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. "You don't have to say anything. I've made my decision." He rose from his chair, and I instinctively followed suit, my stomach clenching. "Mr. Hayes, you're hired. We'll start you next week." I stared at him, dumbfounded. Hired? Just like that? No follow-up questions, no technical tests. "Really?" I asked, the word a breath of disbelief. "Really," he confirmed, his eyes twinkling. "I believe you have potential. A very particular kind of potential." I left his office in a daze, my head spinning. I had a job, a real job, at a place that seemed completely out of my league. But beneath the relief, a small seed of unease began to sprout. Something about the way Alexander Sterling had looked at me, the way he had phrased his decision, it wasn't about my supposed work skills. It was different. It was intense. My first week at Sterling Industries was a surreal experience. The office was everything I'd imagined, a gleaming tower of glass and steel populated by impeccably dressed people who seemed to glide through their workdays. I, on the other hand, felt like a clumsy giraffe trying to navigate a ballroom. I had been assigned a desk in a corner cubicle, which felt miles away from the sleek executive suites. My job title was a junior analyst, a vague label that seemed to encompass everything from running spreadsheets to fetching coffee. Alexander, as the CEO, was a fleeting presence, a figure who occasionally materialized in the open-plan office, a brief, silent acknowledgement with a nod or a quick, intense stare that sent my heart rate soaring. I tried to focus on learning the ropes, poring over reports and trying to decipher the company's complex systems. I mostly spent my days feeling overwhelmed and out of place, a small cog in a very large machine. One afternoon, I was hunched over my computer, battling with a particularly stubborn data set, when a shadow fell across my desk. I looked up, and there he was, Alexander Sterling, standing tall, his presence somehow filling my small cubicle. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice softer than usual, "do you have a moment?" My heart did a strange flip-flop. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," I replied, pushing my chair back. He gestured toward the glass-walled conference room. "Let's talk." I followed him, my mind racing, trying to figure out what I could have done wrong. He closed the door behind us, and the soundproofed room muffled the hum of the office. He turned to face me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "I wanted to see how you were settling in," he began, his gaze fixed on my face. "Are you enjoying your work?" I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "It's interesting, Mr. Sterling. A lot to learn." He moved closer, and a small smile played on his lips. "Yes, there is a lot to learn. About the company, about the work, but also..." He paused, his gaze sliding down to my lips. "About each other." My breath hitched. I knew where this was going, and a strange mixture of fear and excitement surged through me. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as he closed the distance between us, my face heating up. He reached out a hand, his fingers gently brushing my cheek. "I have a confession to make, Mr. Hayes," he whispered, his voice low and intimate. "I didn't hire you for your resume. I hired you for..." He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, "for you." My rational brain screamed, "Get out of here, this is insane," but a different part of me, a part one barely knew, was thrilled. It was like a forbidden fantasy being brought to life, the kind you'd only think about in your most private moments. He didn't give me a chance to respond. He closed the gap between us, and his lips met mine in a kiss that was both demanding and tender. My body reacted with a kind of reckless abandon I had never experienced. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. "I know this is unexpected, Mr. Hayes. I know it's unorthodox." His voice was raspy, with an intensity that made my heart race. "But I can't deny what I feel. What I want." "And what's that?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a look of pure hunger in his eyes. "I want you, Mr. Hayes. Every part of you." That kiss was a turning point. What started as a highly inappropriate power play by my boss, quickly spiraled into a full-blown, clandestine affair. We became masters of sneaking moments together, finding hidden corners in the office, and stolen minutes after hours. We'd meet in the conference room, the same room where he'd confessed that he didn't care about my skills. Or late at night in his office when I'd stayed behind to catch up on paperwork. Every stolen touch, every passionate kiss, intensified the magnetic pull between us, but the fear of getting caught was always lingering. One night, as we were lying in bed after making love, he turned to me, his eyes serious. "There's something I want to talk to you about," he said, his voice low. My heart sank. The other shoe was about to drop. Was this the end? He took my hand and held it in his own. "I'm not going to lie to you, Mr. Hayes. I knew what I was doing when I hired you. I was drawn to you, in a way that I have never been drawn to anyone before. I waited for the rest of his words, my heart pounding. I don't want this to be just a fling, he continued, his eyes searching mine. I want more. I want this to be real. The relationship with Alexander became my whole world. I spent my days working for him and my nights in his arms. Everything else faded into the background. The rent issues were gone. My car troubles vanished. Ramen was a distant memory. My life had become luxurious, comfortable, and incredibly complicated. I was no longer sure what my purpose in life was. Was I an employee, a lover, or something else altogether? This internal battle was a constant struggle. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I glanced at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. I had become someone else, someone who wore expensive clothes and ate fancy meals. I looked different. A wave of unease washed over me, a nagging feeling that I was losing myself. I knew that everything with Alexander was risky, it was dangerous, and I was completely immersed. I felt a strange mix of emotions, excitement, love, and a deep fear of the unknown. Later that day, Alexander gestured for me to follow him into the conference room. The room was silent, the sun casting a warm glow across the sleek table. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I hesitated, not knowing where to start. I'm not sure," I replied, the words barely audible. "I'm just feeling a bit lost." He came closer and put his hand on my shoulder. "Talk to me, Mr. Hayes. I want to know what's going on in that beautiful mind of yours." I took a deep breath. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," I confessed. "I'm not sure who I am anymore." He listened, his expression changing from concern to thoughtful. He pulled up another chair and sat next to me, taking my hands in his. "Mr. Hayes, you are you," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "You are not defined by what you do, or by what you have, or by me. You are a complex and wonderful individual. I will always cherish this part of you, so please, don't lose yourself." He gently brushed his thumb against my knuckles. "I realize that I have been taking control, but I never meant to make you feel lost. I was just caught up in wanting you." His words were like a revelation. For the first time, I felt like I could speak my truth. It was scary, but it was also liberating. "I want to be more than just your lover," I said. "I want to have my own life, my own goals, my own purpose." He nodded slowly, understanding shining in his eyes. "And you should. I don't want to hold you back." The next weekend, Alexander surprised me. "I think we need a break," he said one evening, after a particularly draining workday. Before I knew it, we were driving out of the city, headed to a secluded luxury hotel in the countryside. The city was far behind, and for the first time, we'd both fully relaxed. The evening was filled with laughter, good food, and genuine connection. The room was large and luxurious, filled with soft lighting and the sounds of the forest through the open balcony doors. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing one of Alexander's shirts, which was loose and comfortable. Alexander was pouring us each a glass of wine. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Alexander said, turning to me, his eyes soft and filled with warmth. "About finding your own path, about being more than just this." I met his gaze. "I meant it, you know. I don't want to be anyone's possession, or just a label." Alexander set down the glasses and came closer, reaching for my hand. "And you shouldn't be, you're so much more than that. You are intelligent, ambitious, and have a genuine soul." He gently stroked his fingers across my hand. "I know I messed up, and I made you feel trapped, but know that that is never what I wanted." "I know," I whispered, feeling a rush of emotion. "I know it now. You've changed. We've changed." Alexander nodded, a small smile touching his lips. He pulled me closer, our knees touching. I'm glad we have, it made me see that you are the best thing to ever happen to me. His voice became low and intimate. I need you. He leaned in, our lips meeting in a soft, tender kiss. It was different from our usual passionate encounters. This kiss was filled with genuine affection, respect, and a deep sense of connection. We deepened the kiss, exploring each other's mouths, the taste of wine still lingering on our lips. Alexander's hand slid up to cup my face, his thumb caressing my cheek. Alexander pulled back, his eyes dark with desire and something more, adoration. You're everything, he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. He gently unbuttoned my shirt, his touch slow and deliberate. He ran his hands across my chest, his touch sending shivers down my spine. I reached for Alexander's shirt, slowly unbuttoning it, our eyes never breaking contact. The room was filled with a charged silence, the only sound our breathing. We slid into the bed together, our bodies entwined, our limbs tangled. The physical intimacy was seamless, a culmination of the emotional intimacy we'd been building. Alexander cupped his hand around my face, our foreheads pressed together. I've never felt like this with anyone, Alexander whispered. You're different. My heart melted. I felt seen, loved, and understood in a way that I never had. You're different too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We made love slowly, tenderly, each touch, each kiss a testament to our deep connection. It wasn't just about physical pleasure, but about emotional vulnerability and trust. It was a moment where all barriers fell away, and we were simply two people who had found something rare and precious in each other. Afterwards, we lay together, limbs intertwined, sharing soft kisses, silent and content. The weight of the world seemed to have lifted. We were both naked, open, and comfortable. We were just two souls connected in a moment of pure intimacy, where we saw each other completely and loved each other fully. After that weekend, things began to shift. Alexander was more considerate, he listened to my needs, my wants, and encouraged me to explore new opportunities. I started taking evening courses, honing my skills in areas that genuinely interested me. I was no longer just a junior analyst or Alexander's lover. I was developing into someone I wanted to be. My old life, the one with the ramen and the rent issues, felt like a distant dream. He helped me develop my skills, and instead of just delegating me with useless paperwork, he actually gave me projects that were interesting and that challenged me. I learned a lot from him, from his experiences, and I saw the business side of things. We still had our secret nights, but our relationship evolved. It was no longer just about physical intimacy, it was about connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Sometimes, I would find him staring at me during a meeting, a small smile playing on his lips. He told me that he was proud of me and how far I've come. He became my mentor, and my partner, my lover, and my friend. We were both still figuring things out, but we were doing it together, no secrets, no lies. One evening, after working late, Alexander invited me to his office. There's something I need to discuss with you, he said, his tone serious. My heart started to race. Was this it? Was he finally going to ask me to leave? He took my hand and led me to his desk. He opened a file and slid it across the desk. It was a contract for a new position, head of research and development. It was a job that I had dreamt about. I want you to take on this role, Mr. Hayes, he said, his eyes shining with pride. You deserve it. I was speechless. He was offering me the job of a lifetime. This time, it was not because of my energy or my presence. It was because of my hard work, my dedication, and my skills. Are you serious? I managed to say, tears welling up in my eyes. He nodded, his smile widening. Yes, absolutely serious. You've earned it, Mr. Hayes. I looked at him, my heart filled with an overwhelming mix of gratitude and love. Thank you, Alexander, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. He leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was filled with love, respect, and promise for the future. Just say yes, he whispered against my lips. And I did. I said yes to the job, and I said yes to whatever our future held, whatever was coming next. I was no longer just a guy who had stumbled into a job because he was found attractive. I was a man who had found his purpose, his voice, and his place in the world. And I had done it all with Alexander by my side. I knew that our journey was far from over, that there would be challenges ahead, but I was no longer afraid. I knew that with him, I could overcome anything. We had started this journey on shaky grounds, on a very unbalanced power dynamic, but now, we were equal, we were lovers, partners, colleagues. And that was all that mattered. This job had changed my life, and it was going to continue to change me in ways I could never have predicted. And I wouldn't have it any other way.